The chapel fell silent the moment my mother's voice sliced through the air. You changed your name. Not shock. Not curiosity. Judgment. Dozens of heads turned. My father stiffened, gripping the funeral program until the edges crumpled. Brendan, my brother, stopped laughing in the doorway. Even Vivian, whose life had always unfolded effortlessly in the center of every room, flinched. I slid into the second-row seat, the page still warm in my hand, my new name Leela Merrick printed, in bold, deliberate ink. The chair beside me, the one labeled family, sat untouched, just like every milestone they'd missed. But as I stared at that empty space, something inside me shifted. They thought today's silence exposed me. What they didn't realize was that it exposed them. I grew up learning how to shrink myself. Between louder lives, in our house in Austin, noise meant value. Loud needs were important needs. And my needs, always quiet, always postponed, always forgotten. I remembered the sound of my mother's heels clicking across the kitchen tile sharp, quick, purposeful whenever Brendan needed something. Vivian always got the softer tones. The warm hands on her shoulders, the attention. That bent the room around her like gravity. I was the quiet one, the self-sufficient one, the invisible one. I learned to pack my own lunches, tape my own science fair posters, clean up my own tears. And I learned that interrupting the conversations, swirling above me achieved nothing but the familiar reprimand. Don't be dramatic, Leela. The first time I understood the pattern, I was 12. Vivian had an art show at school 6 canvases propped against the gym wall, each one surrounded by classmates and parents. My mother hovered near her like she was the star attraction. I stood in the corner holding the certificate I'd received earlier that day for winning a regional science competition. No one had come. No one remembered the time. Mom passed without even looking at me. "Hold your sister's jacket," she said, dropping soft fabric into my hands as if they belonged there. The certificate crinkled in my pocket loud enough for me to hear, never loud enough for them. Years later, at my own high school graduation, they arrived late. My row of classmates shuffled uncomfortably as they searched for seats. When my name echoed through the auditorium, I scanned the crowd for familiar faces. Only one empty chair looked back. They told me they'd been stuck in traffic. I learned later they'd stopped for coffee by the time I went to college. I had stopped expecting anything. Department awards, research presentations, achievements that shaped my future, each one unfolded without them. I reminded them anyway. They forgot anyway. Silence became my language. Self-reliance, my refuge. Until the day I filed the papers. The day I became Leela Merrick. Not an act of rebellion, an act of survival. Now here, in this chapel filled with lilies and long-held secrets. My mother's outrage echoed like a final attempt to claim me, but she was too late. The name on the program belonged to someone they never nurtured, someone they never showed up for, someone they no longer had the power to define. And for the first time in my life, the silence didn't hurt. It felt like freedom. Long before I became Leela Merrick, before court stamps and sealed envelopes, I was the girl who learned to disappear without anyone asking where I'd gone. People assume neglect is loud slamming doors, raised voices, dramatic exits. But mine was quiet, soft, polished. The kind that hides beneath smiling Christmas photos and matching outfits. In our house in Austin, favoritism was a rhythm, and everyone but me seemed to know the steps. Brendan, the oldest, carried noise with him like a badge, yelling for snacks, demanding attention, stomping through rooms with the entitlement of someone accustomed to immediate responses. My mother rushed to him every time, her heels clicking like a metronome of priority. Vivian, the middle child, had her own gravitational pull. People naturally drifted toward her, maybe because she glowed in a way that made others want to bask in it. Mom would lean down, adjust her collar, smooth her hair, tuck strands behind her ear with a tenderness I didn't know was possible. I, on the other hand, Learned early that quiet children were convenient children. I learned to tie my own shoes while Vivian cried over tangled laces and Brendan screamed for someone to fix his. I learned to finish school projects alone while Mom ironed Brendan's band uniform and helped Vivian glue sparkles onto poster boards. I learned to clean up quietly, walk quietly, exist quietly. Because when I wasn't quiet, there was always the same reprimand. Don't be dramatic, Evelyn. During those years, I was still Evelyn Brennan identity that fit like hand-me-down shoes. I remember the first time the pattern became undeniable. Vivian's 6th grade art show. The elementary gym was filled with folding tables draped in paper, rows of painted canvases drying under fluorescent lights. My mother hovered near Vivian's section, adjusting her sweater, praising her brush strokes to strangers. I stood at the edge of the crowd holding a science competition certificate. One I'd won that morning. My event had taken place at a different school. My parents had forgotten the time. They hadn't even tried Dot when Mom brushed past me. She placed Vivian's jacket into my arms without looking up. Hold this. The jacket weighed almost nothing, yet it felt heavier than any trophy. I folded my certificate and tucked it into my jeans pocket. The paper crinkled loudly, but no one heard it. No one ever did. High school didn't change anything. During Brendan's football games, my mother screamed from the bleachers as if her voice powered the stadium lights. During Vivian's choir performances, she cried, clutched tissues, bawed. Bouquets Dot during my debate finals, she glanced at her watch. During my academic awards, she stayed home to help Brendan study for a test he wouldn't take seriously anyway. The rare times I pushed back, my father's reply was always the same. Your siblings just need more help. You're fine. You're the strong one. Strong. Independent. Capable. Words that sounded like compliments, but felt like absolution permission for them to forget me. By the time I reached college, I'd internalized the hierarchy. When I earned a departmental award at Rice University, I texted everyone the date weeks in advance. Mom sent a heart emoji. Vivian typed, "Yay." Brendan didn't reply. The night of the ceremony, 5 seats were reserved under my last name. All of them stayed empty. I ate takeout on the dorm steps afterward, the award still in its envelope. I set it beside me like a companion who didn't ask for anything back. That was the night I realized I'd been building a life without witnesses. And the older I became, the quieter I grew. Dot, it wasn't silence born of peace. It was silence born of exhaustion, of shouting into rooms where the walls responded more loudly than my family. The shift didn't come as a single breaking point. It built over years, like water pressing against a door. A missed birthday, a forgotten ceremony, a siblings party scheduled over my milestones every time with some version of, "We'll try." We forgot. Don't be dramatic. But every dismissal engraved itself into me, deeper than I realized. Dot, by the time I reached my PhD years, I knew better than to expect anything. I sent reminders anyway because hope has muscle memory. Even when it hurts. Dot, yet each time they forgot. Each time they chose something else. A blueprint formed quietly inside me. Dot, one day, I would stop reminding them. One day, I would stop asking. One day, I would walk away so completely they wouldn't notice until they realized they no longer had access. But that day wasn't the explosion they expected when I finally disappeared. Dot, it began as a whisper. The soft sound of a folder named Transition being created on my laptop. The quietest revolutions always do. Dot, the breaking point didn't arrive as a dramatic explosion. It came disguised as a calendar date. A simple line of text printed in sharp black ink. PhD dissertation defense, April 22nd. 3 p.m. *8 years of work, sleepless nights, failed experiments, rewrites, presentations, and quiet perseverance, condensed into one afternoon. I printed the formal announcement the university provided. Its edges crisp, its importance undeniable. I mailed copies to Austin, texted screenshots to the family group chat, slipstreamed reminders into every Sunday, dinner conversation. April 22nd at 3. I'd repeat gently, I really want you there. Mom would smile without lifting her eyes from her phone. Dad would hum in vague acknowledgement. Vivian would nod while discussing her kids' soccer teams. Brendan would talk about barbecue rubs and new grill setups. Still, I reminded them, because hope is stubborn, even when it shouldn't be. 5 months out, 3 months out, 6 weeks, 2, every reminder felt like tapping on a locked window. Quiet, pointless. But I tapped anyway. Then, in February, Brendan posted a flyer on social media. Spring barbecue. Bash April 22nd to 1 p.m. to 6 p.m. I stared at the graphic for so long the colors began to blur. The date, the time, the overlap so blatant it felt personal. I called him immediately. Hey, Lil. He answered cheerfully, music blasting in the background. Brendan. My defense is that day, at 3. I've said it so many times. He paused, but not long enough to matter. Oh, right. What time again? People can do both. Just come after. Stanford was an hour away. He knew that. He didn't care. It's my dissertation, I said quietly. And it's just a barbecue. He laughed. Relax. You're overthinking it. IWASN single quotes T.NX. I called Mom. She laughed too softly, the way she always did when she wanted to make my feelings look unreasonable. Honey, don't be dramatic. We'll work something out. Work something out. Meaning, you'll adjust. Not us, but the confirmation came the day before my defense. Mom answered her phone over loud music and laughter. I'm at Brendan's helping set up. She shouted, total chaos here. What time is everything again? 3, I said. Tomorrow. At 3. We'll be there, she said, distracted, unconvincing. Vivian's bringing dessert. She hung up before I could respond. The next afternoon, standing in the hallway outside Patterson Hall, my phone buzzed again. Mom. Where are you? We're all at Brendan's. I didn't reply. I didn't breathe for a moment. I let the silence settle heavy, final, revealing. They weren't confused. They weren't busy. They weren't trying to work anything out. They simply chose something else, someone else, as they always had. I gathered my notes with steady hands and walked into the auditorium alone. The front row where families usually sat held 5 empty, seats waiting for people who had never waited for me. But when I finished speaking, when the committee chair stood and extended his hand, congratulations, Dr. Leela Brennan, my chest tightened with a familiar ache, not grief. Recognition. This moment, this title, this achievement, I had earned entirely without them. That night, while messages from my family stacked unanswered on my phone, I sat alone under the soft glow of my desk lamp. The program from the ceremony lay on the table, creased smooth for the final time. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I opened my laptop, created a new folder titled Transition, and began the quiet work of rebuilding a life they would no longer have access to. It wasn't revenge. It was clarity. The barbecue wasn't the reason they missed my defense. They missed it because they always would. And that was the last time their absence hurt. The night after my PhD defense, the apartment was so quiet I could hear the hum of my desk lamp. Outside, Stanford's campus glowed under soft evening light, students celebrating, friends gathering, futures beginning. But in my apartment, something else was beginning. Something quieter, sharper, irreversible. I opened my laptop, created a new folder. Transition. No dramatic music. No tears. Just a decision settling into place like a puzzle piece I'd been holding for years. The first document I downloaded was the name change petition from the county website. 6 pages. Clear instructions. Required documents. Filing fees. Processing timelines. My pen moved steadily as I highlighted each section. Not one part of my handwriting trembled. Next came the digital ties. I logged into every financial account, banks, student loan portals, investment apps, and updated my contact information to a new email address I'd created minutes. Clear. One unlinked from my family, one with no trace of Brennan anywhere. I saved statements into the transition folder, organized them by date, exported them as PDFs. Order, not emotion. My phone buzzed on the table beside me. Mom, you didn't answer earlier. Call me. Vivian, send us a picture. How did it go? Brendan, we'll celebrate later. Chill. I turned the screen face down. Silence wasn't avoidance anymore. It was a boundary. By midnight, I had created to spreadsheets, accounts under the old name what would transfer under a new one every. Task felt like clearing brush from a path I had never been allowed to walk. Then came the physical world. I opened drawers, pulled out old IDs, insurance cards, school records, anything stamped with the last name that never felt like mine. I placed them in a neat stack on my desk. They looked smaller than I expected, stripped of meaning the moment I decided. They no longer defined me. Around 2 a.m., I stood in the center of my apartment. Boxes still unpacked from months ago. Walls bare except for a map of the Pacific Northwest. I'd pinned up during a moment of wishful thinking. It didn't feel like wishful thinking anymore. It felt like direction. The next morning, I drove to the courthouse. A navy blouse. Pressed. Slacks. Hair pulled back. Clear eyes. The clerk slid the forms toward me without ceremony. Fill these out. I wrote Leela Merrick in the blank spaces with a steadiness that surprised even me. A new name, yes, but also a new boundary. A new architecture for life they couldn't enter by default. When the clerk stamped the petition, the sound was crisp, final. A confirmation not of who I was becoming, but of who I'd already become. Over. The next week, I completed the quiet exodus. I updated my email signatures, transferred my research files to a new drive, archived old messages, closed lingering accounts tied to my past identity, packed the first box in my apartment books stacked in perfect rows. Every action was small. Every action was deliberate. My family would expect a confrontation. They would expect shouting, tears, explanations. They would never expect the one thing they taught me to well, disappearing quietly. This wasn't vengeance. This was reclamation. I wasn't cutting them out to punish them. I was cutting space around myself so I could finally breathe. Becoming Leela Merrick was the first step. Becoming Evelyn Morrison was the rebirth. The petition I filed at the courthouse wasn't just paperwork. It was a quiet declaration that I was done waiting for a family who never showed up. For days afterward, I lived in the space between identities. One name slowly dissolving, another assembling itself. Every morning, I checked my mailbox for updates from the court. Every night, I checked my email for confirmation. But in the meantime, I began the work of digital reconstruction. The first part was simple. Erase what tied me to them. Build what they could never access. I sat at my desk with the blinds half closed, the soft light from the screen illuminating stacks of documents. One by one, I began severing connections that had held me in place for far too long. I created a new email address as simple, clean, professional, Evelyn Morrison. Consulting, no traces of Brennan. No breadcrumbs for them to follow. I updated academic portals, university records, manuscript submissions. I watched my old email fade into obsolescence as each platform asked, "Are you sure you want to remove this address?" Yes. I was sure. Next came cloud storage. My research 8 years of desalination models, water reclamation frameworks, annotated climate datasets had lived on a drive layered with cluttered folders and childhood remnants, photos, old texts, chat logs with Vivian that ended abruptly, voicemails from mom reminding me to be reasonable, digital dust from a life I no longer claimed. I transferred everything essential onto a new drive, clean, structured. Mine. The old drive was deleted. It did not feel like loss. It felt like pruning. I archived necessary documents, editorial correspondence, grant applications, letters from mentors into a folder titled identity_transitioned name. Made me exhale. Not with sadness, but with certainty. Then came the systems that governed adult life. Bank accounts, investment profiles, tax portals, healthcare records. Each update required verification, signatures, authentication codes sent to the new email. Not once did I falter. The act of repeating my new name digitally, administratively, officially felt like laying bricks for a house I'd lived in emotionally long before it legally existed. One evening, as I typed Evelyn Morrison into yet another account change form, I felt an unexpected warmth move through me. Not pride, not triumph. Ownership. Asterisk. This was the name of someone who showed up for herself. Someone who stood alone in auditoriums where others failed to stand for her. Someone who didn't need permission to exist fully. When the letter from the court finally arrived, I wasn't prepared for how ordinary the envelope looked. White, thin, folded at the corners. I opened it with steady hands. Your petition for legal name change has been approved. Just one sentence. So quiet. So final. I read it again. Then a third time. Each time, the reality settled deeper into bone. Evelyn Morrison wasn't a rejection of who I was. It was the evolution of who I had always tried to become. The next days unfolded like a private ceremony. I visited the DMV and handed over my old ID. The clerk stamped the paperwork without looking twice. I signed the new documents with a pen I had brought specifically for today. Black ink. Smooth tip. A clean stroke. Seeing the name printed beside my photograph felt surreal. The caption beneath my picture wasn't just an identifier. It was an anchor. At the bank, the teller updated my accounts and printed new cards. The old ones were shredded before my eyes, a symbolic gesture I didn't realize would move me. Bit by bit, the world around me aligned with the world inside me. By the end of the week, every place that mattered recognized me as Evelyn Morrison. Only my family did not. They were still calling the old number, sending the old messages, clinging to the old identity they thought they owned. Their confusion, their desperation, was proof of how completely I had stepped beyond their reach. And for the first time, the silence I lived in wasn't something forced onto me. It was something I chose. Something I shaped. Something that finally sounded like freedom. Portland greeted me the way quiet people greet each other, softly, without demand, without needing anything in return. The city felt like an exhale I had held for years. Gray skies, slow drizzle, maple-lined streets, everything muted enough to let a person breathe. My apartment was small but bright, with a narrow balcony that overlooked a gentle flow of bicycles and morning dog walkers. After years of living near the noise of a family that never saw me, this new silence felt tender. Not harsh. I unpacked slowly. Books stacked in neat lines. Research folders ranged by color. A single photograph pinned above my new desk. Me and my grandmother Ruth at a birthday dinner. Long before I learned what absence meant. She was the only one who ever looked at me like I was the main subject in the frame. On my first morning at the environmental consulting firm, I expected the old heaviness to return. Years of being compared, minimized, overshadowed had taught my body to brace for evaluation. But when I walked through the glass doors, something subtle shifted. No one here knew me as the quiet one. No one here compared me to louder siblings or held me to unspoken hierarchies. I was simply Evelyn Morrison, a new name, a new presence. A new beginning. The receptionist greeted me with genuine warmth. My supervisor walked me to my desk, asking thoughtful questions about my research instead of pretending interest. Colleagues introduced themselves one by one, each interaction uncomplicated, unburdened by history. Not once did anyone say, "Oh, you're Vivian's sister?" Or Brendan mentioned. Or, "Well, your mother said." No one knew them. No one cared. They cared about my work, my mind, my contribution. For the first time, I wasn't filling in a space someone else had carved out. I was occupying one. That was mine from the beginning. During lunch, a colleague named Alex invited me to a small cafe tucked between two old brick buildings. He asked about my desalination project, not to flatter, but because he found it genuinely fascinating. His curiosity wasn't performance, it was sincerity. I felt something unfamiliar flicker inside me. Recognition. Not the kind granted by others, but the kind that blooms when you're finally in a place that allows you to exist without shrinking. In the evenings, I sat on my balcony with a blanket draped across my shoulders, listening to the soft hum of the city. The rain traced delicate paths down the railing, unhurried, almost meditative. Each night, I felt the same realization settling deeper. I wasn't missing anything anymore. Not their approval. Not their presence. Not their noise. In Portland. I wasn't the forgotten daughter. I wasn't the empty seat in a crowded auditorium. I wasn't the name they didn't show up for. I was seen, finally. Not compared. Not diminished. Just seen. And the silence that once felt like punishment now felt like the first true home I'd ever had. I hadn't planned on seeing them again. Not this soon. Not like this. But when my grandmother Ruth passed away, there was no hesitation. She was the only person in that family who ever treated me like someone worth showing up for. For her, I would return. The chapel in Austin looked exactly the same as the last time I'd stepped inside its polished pews. Lilies perfuming the air, stained glass windows casting soft colors on the carpet. I arrived early, choosing a seat near the aisle where the morning light filtered through like a blessing. My program rested in my hands, printed clearly across the top. Evelyn Morrison, my new name, my real name. I traced the letters with my thumb, grounding myself. Then the doors opened behind me. My mother stopped mid-step when she saw the program in my hands. You changed your name. Not whispered, not hidden, announced like an accusation. The chapel froze. My father's jaw tightened, his fingers curling around his hat. Vivian blinked rapidly, like she was trying to clear a smudge on glass. Brendan looked like the air had been knocked out of him. They stared at me as though I had done something unforgivable simply by becoming someone they could no longer shape. I met my mother's eyes. You should have shown up, I said softly. Her lips parted, but the chapel attendant signaled for silence. She obeyed, but her gaze stayed fixed on me the way people stare at a locked door they used to walk through. Without knocking. During the service, their eyes never left me. Confusion, frustration, fear, because they were finally realizing what paperwork can do, how a single line on a form could sever the unspoken power they believed they still held. After the final hymn, my mother followed me out into the courtyard, her heels clicking to fast, to sharp. Evelyn, this isn't fair, she whispered. We made a mistake. Families move past things. I paused beside my rental car, the wind gently lifting the edge of my coat. You didn't forget my defense, I replied. You prioritized a barbecue. That's not true. It is, I said. And the systems I exist in now only recognize people who show up. You weren't listed. The rest handled itself. Her face tightened, realization sinking in like a slow bruise. Paperwork, government files, digital records, none of it bowed to guilt. Vivian approached next. You didn't have to go this far. I didn't go far, I told her. I went where I was seen. Brendan didn't say anything at all. They looked at me like I was a ghost, someone they once knew but could no longer touch, no longer reach. And they were right. I opened the car door, stepping inside without another word. Through the windshield, their faces blurred, three silhouettes, fading into the landscape of a life I no longer belonged to. The engine hummed softly. The air smelled like rain and distance. As I drove away, one truth settled gently, firmly, beautifully. They couldn't reach me anymore. Not legally, not digitally, not emotionally. I hadn't just changed my name. I had changed the story. Portland wrapped itself around me like a soft evening coat, quiet, steady, unintrusive. It was the first place where silence wasn't a punishment, but a way of breathing. Weeks passed, and the rhythm of my new life formed without effort. Each morning, I walked to work under gray skies, the rain stitching gentle patterns on the sidewalk. At my desk, my name Evelyn Morrison appeared on memos, reports, and research briefs. Every time I saw it, a small piece of me clicked into place, as though I had finally stepped into the shape of someone I had been growing toward for years. In the evenings, I sat on my balcony with a blanket over my shoulders. The city hummed below soft traffic, faint music, a steady pulse instead of the chaotic noise I grew up around. For the first time, the quiet inside me did not feel like isolation, it felt like presence. Sometimes I thought of the empty chair at my defense, the one I stared at before delivering 8 years of work to a room missing 5 faces. But now, that memory didn't sting. It simply existed flat and distant, like a photograph tucked at the back of a drawer. I didn't hate them. Hate requires weight, and I was no longer carrying theirs. The paperwork had done what I never could. It created a boundary clean enough to see, and strong enough to stand behind. Asterisk, not a wall, a line. One that separated the life where I kept waiting to be chosen from the life where I chose myself. When I signed my name Evelyn Morrison, the silence that followed wasn't empty, it was mine. Message and lesson for the listener: some families won't notice you until you walk away, and some won't value you until your silence becomes permanent. Your boundaries are not punishments. They are proof you finally learned where to stand. Choosing yourself isn't selfish. It's necessary. And it's the first step toward a life that finally feels like yours.